you know, those guys are guys that I grew up with and guys that I competed with my entire life. And I went to Elon and they went to NC State. So that put a huge chip on my shoulder. Like, hey, look, I belong in the same conversation, if not in a bigger conversation than some of the guys that, are doing things that I didn't necessarily have access to. So,
Welcome back to another episode of George on Sports with me, your host George. And on today's show, you can see him here live in the flesh, Coleman, DB for the Indianapolis Colts. Thank you for joining the show, and how are you, bro?
I'm feeling good, man. I appreciate you having me on. It's been a long time since I've did a proper interview. So, coming back is a blessing, and I'm happy that you had me up here.
It's probably the first one you've done with a UK Colts fan as well. I'm pretty sure that's the case.
Yeah, the only interaction I've had with UK people is me watching the new season of Love Island. So this is a little bit different. It's a little bit different, right? But I'm happy to spend time with you, man.
Absolutely. We're going to take it back, and we're going to take it all the way back and talk about your come up in terms of sports. So obviously you was at, Leesville High School. You went to Elon Uni, and then obviously now you're an Indianapolis Colt. Is sport something that you've always been drawn to? Is that something you've always done, looking back at your life?
Yeah, I mean, you can take it back as far as you want. If you even want to take it back to birth, you can do that. Football is something that's always been a huge part of my life since literally the moment that or as far as back as I can possibly remember. My whole family's big on sports. My mom played tennis in college. My dad played football in college. So just growing up, sports has always been a huge part of my life, and I think I've tried every sport that you can imagine on the way to my path here in the NFL.
Is it fair to say that obviously your dad playing in the league, I know he played for rivals Tennessee Titans for a couple of seasons. Is it fair to say that that kind of steered your hand to take ball to the next level, or is that something you just decided yourself?
Yeah, that's a tricky question. I think it always influenced me for sure, but I'd like to say that to this point, I've started to write my own story. I definitely had a long journey to get here, and it looked a lot different than my dad's path looked. But I'd say it definitely influenced me, especially as a young kid, being able to look at what he was able to achieve in football and kind of try to mimic that, especially in my younger years. But I think as I've grown older, I feel like I've made the choices that have brought me here, and yeah, there's definitely been some influence. But at the end of the day, I think it's been my path and my journey to get to this point. So I think I've veered away kind of from what my dad had set up for me. But it definitely had its influence, especially early on.
And you mentioned there the journey that you've taken about it being a long road. Talk to me about Elon Uni. You go to Elon University, you 156 solo tackles, and you tie fifth in Elon school history with Brandon Wiggins. 2021, you're named to the all first team all CAA. You've obviously, you've gone in, you've made your mark. And one of the things that stood out for me and continue to stand out when I read about you is your work ethic, your drive, and your ability to go and tackle. What was your experience like playing ball at uni?
Yeah, so at Elon, it was definitely a different experience. I'm from North Carolina, if you haven't already known. And Elon is in North Carolina, but it's a very different culture. If you know anything about the U.S. geography, there's a North and the South, and most people in the South are pretty big on football. It's just one of the things that's huge there. So I came from a school that was pretty big on football, an area that's pretty big on football, and a state that's pretty big on football. The demographics of Elon are a lot different from that, where most of the students are from the North. So football is not necessarily the biggest priority there. So it's a bit of a culture shock for me to kind of come into a situation where football wasn't the main priority for the student body campus, nor was it something that they took as much pride in that I was used to. So it kind of humbled me and brought me to a point where, I kind of had to work um, and develop myself outside of football to kind of make myself whole as a man. So I think the biggest things I took away from Elon was one, it was a great opportunity to play football right away and be able to build myself up because I felt like, I had a chip on my shoulder thinking I could go to bigger schools and whatnot. But that's where I ended up, and I made a name for myself early on, and I think slowly but surely we started to build a name as a program, and it became a brotherhood that could really make some noise in the CAA, and I think looking back, me and my brothers can say that we achieved that.
And how does it feel knowing that you become the 18th player from Elon to sign an NFL deal? Obviously, you look back at that list, there's a number of different guys on that list, and now you join that name, that list of people who have gone from playing at Elon to being in the NFL. What does that feel like to you?
It's a great stepping stone for me. It's a milestone. I think at a certain point, I felt like I had a chance to do it, and I had kind of started to shift my focus, but you go to Elon, you commit there, you're not thinking about the NFL right away. My first job there was to, hey, let's get on the field somehow. Let's find a way to break this starting lineup. And slowly but surely, I started to make some noise and give myself a chance. And to be able to say that I'm one of the 18 people that has actually been able to, make their mark on the NFL is a huge thing. And I think it's putting Elon on the map. And, there's a lot of FCS talent out there. I played a lot of guys that could play legitimate ball at this level. And I think, one person at a time, we're going to start to show exactly what we can do, from the Cooper Cups to the Trey Lances to myself. I think, you'll start to see guys making noise more and more as time goes on.
I'm glad you said that because this is a debate that I have with a lot of guys over here. I was actually just with Josh Allen of the Jaguars yesterday at an event. He was here in the UK, and one of the things we spoke about was, so you just mentioned some names who have gone from Elon and they've gone to the NFL, Cooper Cup, yourself, and some others. You mentioned a small school, big school. There's a lot of talk about, when you come from a big school, you're expected to be this level of player, or when you're drafted in the first round, second round, you're expected to be this level of player. But we've seen time and time again, at the end of the day, technically it doesn't really matter. Aside from the money aspect, of course, we understand that side of things, but you can be undrafted, drafted, seventh round, fifth round. As long as someone gives you that chance, you can go out there and prove to people that you are, what people think you are, and you can go out there and become that guy. I say that to lead to the fact that you put up some insane numbers at your pro day, where you ran a 4.37 40-yard dash at the pro day, and that led all safeties at the combine too. A 39-inch vertical and a 10.6 broad jump. I think Nick DeMarco as well, the strength and conditioning director, had a part to play in this. Someone that you say helped you quite a bit in this process, would you say?
Yeah, Nick DeMarco was a great strength trainer for us at Elon. He definitely did a lot of things that helped me get bigger, faster, stronger while I was in college. And I think even beyond college, when I was training for the pro day, is something that I could look back to and see a lot of carryover in the things that we did at Elon and the things that I was able to do for the pro day.
Where do you get your drive from? Where does the drive come from for you to want to be bigger, better, faster? At some point during your career and your time at Elon, you mentioned there at the start, when you joined Elon, you weren't necessarily thinking about the NFL, but there would have been some point where your mindset would have, you realize your potential, and you have huge, huge potential, and you're putting up crazy numbers. You're going in the record books at the uni of Elon. Where does the drive, the hunger, the passion, the fight, where does it come from to want to reach the high echelon?
Yeah, I think very early on, my goal was to be in the NFL. I think somewhere along the way, you gotta have expectations that are sort of catered toward your situation. So at Elon, when I first got there, I'm at a small school. They're not sending guys to the league. They're coming off of um, a slow season. So my priorities immediately shifted to what can I do to get on the field and help this team win. Um, I think the drive that I've had has always come from having a chip on my shoulder. Like, no matter what situation I've been in, I've always been around the best competition that in the area. Felt like I could compete with some of the best guys in Raleigh, North Carolina, who sent many guys to the NFL, from Aleem McNeil to Dexter Lawrence. Now you got guys like there and Drake Thomas from NC State coming out, and they're on top as well. But you know, those guys are guys that I grew up with and guys that I competed with my entire life. And I went to Elon and they went to NC State. So that put a huge chip on my shoulder. Like, hey, look, I belong in the same conversation, if not in a bigger conversation than some of the guys that, are doing things that I didn't necessarily have access to. So, I think the biggest motivation for me was to kind of prove myself and prove that I belong, regardless of, what it may look like on paper. I've always been able to succeed in any situation I've been in. I've never been a backup, which is crazy. I've started the last 20 seasons, almost 18 seasons of my life, which is
Yeah.
insane. Obviously this is a completely different situation in and of itself, but that just goes to show that, I've always had a chip on my shoulder, and I've never put anything on the field other than that.
Looking back at your college career, and now you've had some time with the Colt, you've had mini camp, you've been around the guys, you've been around the other draft picks as well, and other people that they brought into the building. What would you say stands out in terms of a difference from playing ball at Elon to now being with the Colts at the facility? What stands out to you, and what's different, and what adjustments have you had to make, if any?
Yeah, it's been a huge difference. I think some of the ones that stand out to me are just the different level of professionalism that a lot of the players carry. That you have guys that are legitimate professionals that are making millions on millions of dollars and it still come in with the same demeanor. So you kind of get to see exactly what a true professional looks like. A guy that's humble. He's about his business. He comes in and he works. And that's something that you're not used to in college. You know, you have your team leaders, you have your rah-rah guys, you got your guys that know the ins and outs of the playbook, but you don't have a true professional because you have school and everything else tied into it. And these guys are putting food on their plates for the family. So I think getting the chance to see the grown men that are true professionals that have years and years of experience of a routine and a habit that works. You know, I think getting to see that is the biggest thing. Also shifting my mentality from somebody that can help young guys to being the guy that can learn from other people. You know, has been humbling. It's also been something that stands out to me. And I think the last thing I would say that stands out is just the urgency with every single day. You know, in college, there's a certain level of comfort that you feel around your brothers. There's a certain level of comfort that you feel in the facility that you know so well, that in the coaches that you feel comfortable with, and the system and the playbook. And you know that the next day you're going to wake up and you're going to be on that team. Here, there's a very different mentality, and although the brotherhood still stays the same, I think it's very different in the sense that it's a essentially a 1 day contract for you every day, and in order to put food on your plate, you're essentially going to have to take food off somebody else's plate. So there's a different level of urgency that comes with being an undrafted free agent as well as being on an NFL roster, where each and every person understands that this is a business and that there's 90 people on the roster right now. There's not going to be 90 when we step on the field. There's going to be 53. So 30 of these guys that are your brothers aren't going to make it. You might see them around. You might see them at another team. You might see you're going to see them again somewhere on the field, but it might not necessarily be with you going to war. And in order to get that spot, you know what I mean, it's going to be dog eat dog world. And I think there's the love is still there, but there's definitely a different sense in the air of urgency with each and every day that comes along with it.
Yeah, that's one thing that we echo over here in the UK. And when I do get to speak to other players as well, is there's a phrase that the NFL stands for "not for long," which is like a kind of like a running joke. But like you said, I mean, it's almost like a 1 day contract. You're playing to put food on your table. You're playing to make sure that you're on the roster the next day, because at the end of the day, they're going to cut that thing down, and you want to make sure that you're able to to stand out and be part of that 53.
Yep.
Is there anyone in the squad that you've kind of like bonded with or gelled with, or you found you can sort of like lean into each other during this process as you begin off with the Colts?
Yeah, I think I was surprised at just how supportive and there for us that the whole defensive backfield was. I think that the rookie class obviously is very close because we came in together and we spent a lot of time with each other, but also just the older guys. I think what shocked me is that it's not necessarily a personal thing or there's no egos in the way, despite these guys being hot shot. Some guys from Alabama, some guys from tiny schools, but all of them have experience and they've made plenty of money doing the game.
Mm.
Um, these guys are humble, and the biggest thing is they want to win, and they understand they're gonna need you to be ready to win if your name is called, if they want to have the best opportunity to win as a team. So in terms of guys in particular, I'd say that Kenny Moore was somebody that I expected to need in my corner very early on, and I think he's been really supportive and he's been really helpful in terms of getting me up to speed. And I think Tony Brown is somebody who I didn't even know going into this process, but he's been somebody that's helped me a ton too, and he's got a lot of experience in the defense, and he's been extremely helpful and supportive with everything that I've been trying to get done since I joined the squad.
Now, obviously, you'll know the Colts. We've had a bit of a rough, I'd say, QB room, if you like, over the last few years. Obviously, if you look all the way back to Andrew Luck, and we've kind of had a bit of a QB carousel, I like to call it, since then. In comes AR5, none other than Anthony Richardson, picked up in the draft. What kind of vibe do you get from him? Obviously, you've been around and you've seen him. What's your immediate response to seeing a guy like that who's built like a linebacker, can run like a wide receiver, and can sling it like anyone?
Right. Yeah, this is crazy because a lot of people ask me about AR, and what's interesting is in football, it's one of the rare spaces where you're going to find guys that are literally world famous, and then you'll find guys like me who almost have no name, and we get to spend time with each other and converse, and it's literally a level playing field in a equal situation. In terms of AR, he's a cool dude. Like he's not splashy. He comes to work every day. He works hard. He's a lot more quiet than I anticipated. You expect the huge personalities from quarterbacks that are always in the spotlight, but he's very humble, very driven. He wants to learn. He's here to work, and everybody's gonna have their growing pains moving from the next level. But I think he's a physical specimen, like you said. I'd rather play with him than play against him. I'm happy he's on our team because he's not somebody I would want to deal with as a defender, just looking at his athletic profile. But I think he's got a ton of potential, and we'll see how it works out.
Mm.
It's hard to call it, but I think that Coach Steichen is the perfect guy for him. And you know, I've seen his progression slowly but surely, and we'll see where it goes from here. But I think he's got a ton of potential, and if anybody's going to carry this franchise moving forward, it's going to be him.
Mm. Take me back to your mini camp and describe to me what a day in the life looks like. So, what does the day look like? What time are you up? What are you having meetings, classrooms, and then you're having breakfast and you're hitting the field? What does it look like?
Yeah, minicamp's a roller coaster. It's fast and it's definitely steep. You come into minicamp with pretty much no prior knowledge of anything. I didn't really have any details on what the defense was going to look like or anything of the sort. So we come in immediately. You wake up at 5:45 is when I wake up. The shuttle leaves at 6:30. So you wake up, get ready to go. You get in a hotel. The entire rookie class is in a hotel unless somebody lives in Indianapolis, in which case they can drive from their home if they'd like. But you get there, you get breakfast. You're gonna get a lift as early as 7. Right after the lift, you're gonna have meetings. You might have a general nutrition meeting, but you probably are gonna have football meetings right after that. So you're gonna have a couple hour long football meetings. Then you're gonna have a walkthrough. You're gonna have a practice. You're gonna come back from practice after getting tons of reps. I think by this point you're probably physically exhausted. You might get some treatment after that. Right after meetings, or right after that, you're gonna have lunch. Then you're gonna have more meetings, and then by then it's probably about 2:15, 2:20. At that point, you're gonna have another set of meetings to go over the film that you just had from practice. And then after all those meetings, you're going to have a rookie academy meeting, which is kind of general stuff that nobody really talks about that you just don't know going into the NFL. It's kind of there to help you transition from college to the NFL. So you might talk about finances, you might talk about league policy, you might talk about rule changes, you might talk about how to handle situations, you might even talk about mental health and things like that. Just anything and everything that you can think of to cover the spectrum of moving from college, being a student, to being a professional athlete. And they've done an amazing job. DT, or David Thornton, the former Tennessee Titan player, he's done a great job helping us out. And it's been a blessing. But yeah, those are our days, and they're long. And you might get back to the hotel around 6 o'clock. So I remember
Yeah.
day 2 of mini camp. I got back home at 7 p.m. and my plan was, hey, look, I'm gonna take a 30-minute nap and I'm gonna get on my playbook and then I'm gonna go to sleep for the night. And my 30-minute nap at 7 turned into me waking up at 5:45 the next morning. So it was a rough one, but yeah, it's definitely a roller coaster. But you're gonna have to find a way to persevere and make it through.
Yeah, I'm glad I asked that question because you mentioned something that I find really interesting. The side that people don't know about, the meetings that you just mentioned, obviously you have tons of meetings, but meetings in particular that actually help to prepare you and guide you through the transition from college to the NFL because it is a big jump. You mentioned mental health, you mentioned policies, rule changes, things that we as fans, I mean, I played for 11 years. I played running back here in the UK, but it's a very different level compared to the NFL, clearly. But to know that obviously these teams are looking out for you guys as people as well and taking into account that obviously some people may or may not struggle making that transition, but putting the onus on them and making sure that they guide you guys through the process is something that I feel like people should know because it's easy for us to watch you guys on Sunday and see you guys making the highlight plays. But as you mentioned, you guys are grinding, you're having a nap and it turns into the next day. You're getting your head in a playbook, you're having to have meeting after meeting after meeting. So I do think it's important to show the kind of like human side of it because you are athletes, but you're also human too. Have you had to adjust to any travel? So you mentioned obviously being in a hotel, you're from North Carolina. Guys are coming from all over the place. Has that taken a toll too in terms of the traveling aspect?
I would say yes and no. We definitely have the ability to go move around, and I think the biggest thing in terms of travel is kind of the accessibility for me. So back home, I don't have as many resources. So on this break that we're on right now, we have about a month until training camp. A lot of guys have went to their guys in Arizona, or your guy in Texas, your guy in California. As a rookie, I don't really have the funding or the resources to travel to these bigger cities and kind of have just a set trainer and a set program that's kind of established for me. I'm coming off of, college where you don't make anything. So my bank account's, it's bleeding right now. It's not looking great. For me, I decided, I could go home, but I could also, with the best opportunity for me is to stay here, just forego any type of traveling that I could be doing, any vacations or any of that where I'd end up spending money and doing this and that.
Yeah.
Just focus and be in a situation where I can go back to the facility. I can use the resources that I have here, which is much more
Okay.
back home, and be able to grow as a player, within the system that I'm going to be a part of for the next few years.
Yeah, I think it's always a good. I mean, we read news stories all the time about how hard a guy works, first in the building, last out, and things like that. Being around the facility, showing that you're wanting to be around and do the extra work, always goes a long way. But before I let you go, I have one last question for you. You've got a documentary out there on your social media, which kind of like documented some of your playing time, and at the very end of your documentary, you're asked a question in terms of, where do you see yourself in the next few years in terms of football? And just as you begin to answer, the documentary comes to an end. So I'm curious to know, what was your answer when you were asked, where do you see yourself in terms of football in the next few years? Can you reveal that?
Yeah, I can tell you that it wasn't here. It was definitely somewhere in the NFL, but I could never have predicted the situation and exactly how this is went, and especially couldn't have predicted what it was going to look like for me. So I think I probably said something along the lines of, me solidifying myself on an NFL roster and having a chance to compete for playing time. But even that is a gross oversimplification looking back of the situation that I find myself in. And it's a blessing every day, but it's certainly more than I expected in terms of just the overall workload and the things that go into it and just the nuances, because there's so much involved that you don't get to see on the field
Yeah.
with making this transition. So, putting my head down, working hard, and we'll see where the story goes from here.
And with that, Cole, that brings us to the end of the show. I can't thank you enough for coming on. Obviously, I'm probably the biggest Colts fan in the UK. I'm going to put it out there. Biggest Colts fan in the UK. And when I saw that you had joined the team, obviously I wanted to get you on, and there's a few more guys that I want to speak to as well. But honestly, thank you so much for coming on the show. All I can say is go Colts, man. I'm rooting for you, man. You got some crazy talent, man. And I can't wait to see you out there balling. But I've been George from George on Sports, here with DB Coleman of the Indianapolis Colts. And it's been great. So stay tuned for the next one. But until then, we'll see you soon.